Have you ever wondered why your 30s feel like financial quicksand? One day you're making decent money and feeling pretty good about yourself, and the next day you're staring at your bank account wondering where the hell all your money went. Maybe it disappeared into daycare costs that rival a mortgage payment, or perhaps it evaporated paying for your friend's third wedding this year because apparently everyone got married at exactly the same time. Either way, if you're in your 30s and feeling like you're financially treading water while everyone else seems to be swimming laps around you, this video is going to change everything you think you know about building wealth during the most chaotic decade of your life. My name is Nick, and I help people understand money without the boring suit and tie lectures that make you want to fall asleep. If you're tired of feeling behind financially and want to actually understand how wealth building works during your messiest decade, make sure to subscribe and hit that like button if this information helps you see your situation differently. Let me start with something that might surprise you. Your 30s aren't the decade where you magically have everything figured out financially. They're what experts call the messy middle, and there's a damn good reason for that name. This is the decade where life comes at you from every possible direction simultaneously. You've got career pressures because you're supposed to be climbing some invisible ladder. You've got family pressures because suddenly everyone's having kids or taking care of aging parents. You've got social pressures because your friends are buying houses and taking Instagram-worthy vacations while you're eating cereal for dinner again. But here's what nobody tells you about this financial chaos. It's completely normal, and more importantly, it doesn't mean you're failing at money. The messy middle earned its name because everyone goes through it, even the people who end up wealthy later in life. The difference isn't that some people avoid the mess entirely. The difference is that some people understand how to build wealth despite the mess, while others let the chaos convince them to give up entirely. Think about what's actually happening in your 30s from a practical standpoint. You're probably earning more money than you ever have in your life, which sounds great until you realize you're also spending more money than you ever have. Your rent or mortgage payment has likely doubled since your 20s. If you have kids, you've discovered that small humans are basically tiny money-shredding machines disguised as adorable creatures. If you don't have kids yet, you're probably saving for a wedding, a house down payment, or both, which feels like trying to fill a bathtub with a teaspoon. Meanwhile, everyone around you seems to have their act together. Your college roommate just bought a house with a 3-car garage. Your coworker is maxing out their retirement account while also taking European vacations every year. Your social media feed is full of people your age who apparently have unlimited money for home renovations and expensive hobbies. It's enough to make you wonder if you missed some sort of adult financial orientation where they explained how everyone else figured this out. Here's the truth that might sting a little, but will ultimately set you free. Most of those people don't actually have their finances figured out either. They're just better at making it look that way on the outside. The average net worth for someone in their 30s is actually much lower than you probably think. We're talking about a median net worth of around $39,000 by age 30, and that includes everything they own minus everything they owe. When you break that down, most of that net worth is tied up in things like their car and maybe some home equity. The actual cash and investments, we're looking at maybe $17,000 for the typical 30-year-old. But wait, it gets even more interesting when you look at the data. The average American doesn't even start seriously investing until age 33. The median first-time homebuyer is 40 years old. If you started contributing to a retirement account in your 20s, even if it was just $50 a month, you're already ahead of most people. If you have any emergency savings at all, you're in better shape than a huge portion of your peers. This isn't meant to make you feel superior to anyone else. It's meant to show you that this feeling of being behind is largely an illusion created by comparing your financial reality to other people's financial highlight reels. Personal finance isn't a race where everyone starts at the same time with the same advantages and the same finish line. It's more like a marathon where everyone starts at different points, runs at different speeds, and has different obstacles to overcome along the way. The beautiful thing about your 30s, despite all the chaos, is that time is still working massively in your favor when it comes to building wealth. This is something most people don't truly understand until they see the actual numbers. Let's say you're 30 years old, you're making $100,000 a year, and you've managed to save $100,000 total. That might feel like you're moving at a snail's pace, especially when you read about people who have millions saved by 30. But here's where compound interest becomes your best friend, even if it doesn't feel that way yet. If you did absolutely nothing else, never saved another dollar, and just let that $100,000 grow at 8% annually, you'd have over $200,000 by age 40. That's your money, literally doubling without you lifting a finger. Now, obviously, you're not going to stop saving completely, but this shows you the power of what you've already accomplished. If you can manage to save just $450 per month, on top of what you already have, you'll reach 3 times your annual income saved by age 40. That might sound impossible when you're looking at your current budget, but remember, your income will likely increase over the next 10 years too. What feels like a stretch today becomes much more manageable as your career progresses. The wealth multiplier effect is still incredibly powerful in your 30s. If you're in your early 30s, every dollar you invest has the potential to multiply by 20 times by the time you retire. Even if you're in your late 30s, that multiplier is still around 8 times. Yes, starting in your 20s would have been better, but starting in your 30s is still infinitely better than starting in your 40s or 50s. This brings us to one of the most important mindset shifts you can make about building wealth in your 30s. The financial order of operations isn't a straight line, and your journey doesn't have to be either. Life is going to interrupt your perfect financial plan probably multiple times. You might lose a job, have unexpected medical expenses, need to help family members, or face any number of situations that require you to pause your wealth building temporarily. This doesn't mean you're failing at money. It means you're living a normal human life where unexpected things happen. The people who successfully build wealth over time aren't the ones who never face setbacks. They're the ones who understand that financial progress sometimes looks like moving forward, sometimes looks like moving backward, and sometimes looks like moving sideways while you deal with whatever life throws at you. The key is understanding that building wealth in your 30s isn't about perfection. It's about persistence through the beautiful disaster that this decade tends to be. You're going to have months where you manage to save $800 and feel like you're finally getting your act together. Then your car will need a new transmission, your kid will need braces, and your best friend will ask you to be in their wedding party, which apparently requires buying a dress that costs more than your monthly grocery budget. This is where emergency funds become absolutely critical, not just for your financial health, but for your sanity. Think of an emergency fund as buying yourself margin in life. When you have 3 to 6 months of expenses sitting in a boring savings account earning almost nothing, you're not just protecting yourself from financial catastrophe, you're protecting yourself from making desperate financial decisions that can derail your wealth building for years. Here's something nobody talks about regarding emergency funds. Having cash when everyone else is broke is actually a form of wealth building that gets completely overlooked. When your friend's car breaks down and they have to put the repair on a credit card at 20% interest, you get to pay cash and move on with your life. When a great investment opportunity comes along but requires quick action, you have options that other people simply don't have. The recommended emergency fund amount changes depending on your situation. If you're working and have a steady income, 3 to 6 months of expenses is usually sufficient. But as you get closer to retirement, that number should increase to 12 to 18 months because you have less time to recover from financial setbacks. In your 30s, you're probably somewhere in between, especially if you have dependents who are counting on your income. Now, let's talk about something that drives me absolutely crazy. The number of people in their 30s who think they need to get fancy with their investments because they're somehow more sophisticated now. They'll have $50,000 saved and decide they need to start picking individual stocks or investing in cryptocurrency or getting involved in some complex strategy they read about online. Meanwhile, their money could be quietly growing in boring index funds without them having to become a financial analyst. Keep your investing strategy simple, especially during this chaotic decade. Low-cost index funds, target date funds, and automated investing are your best friends. You don't need to impress anyone with your investment knowledge. You need your money to grow consistently while you deal with all the other demands on your time and attention. The goal isn't to beat the market. The goal is to participate in the market's growth over time without making it another full-time job. This is where a lot of people get caught up in what I call busy doing nothing. They'll spend hours researching individual stocks, reading financial newsletters, and trying to time the market, all while their money sits in cash, earning basically nothing because they can't decide on the perfect investment. Perfect is the enemy of good when it comes to building wealth, especially in your 30s when time is both your greatest asset and your scarcest resource. One practical thing you can do right now that will make a huge difference in your financial organization is consolidating old retirement accounts. If you're like most people in their 30s, you've probably had a few different jobs and you've left a trail of old 401k accounts scattered across former employers. Each one is probably earning different returns, charging different fees, and making it impossible to see your complete financial picture. Rolling these accounts into a single IRA or into your current employer's plan can dramatically simplify your financial life. You'll have better visibility into how your investments are performing, you'll likely pay lower fees, and you'll be able to rebalance your portfolio more easily. It's one of those tasks that feels overwhelming until you actually do it, and then you wonder why you waited so long. Now, there's something else I need to tell you that most people completely ignore, and it's holding them back. Says in your 30s, your income is growing. Maybe you got promoted, maybe you switched jobs and got a raise, or maybe you've been at your company for years and they finally bumped your salary. Whatever happened, your income is probably higher in your 30s than it was in your 20s. Here's where most people mess up. They increase their spending to match their new income. New apartment, new car, new clothes, nicer restaurants. Suddenly they're making $10,000 more per year, and they're living $10,000 more per year. They call this lifestyle inflation, and it's one of the biggest wealth killers in your 30s. All that extra income that could have been going toward your future just gets absorbed into a nicer lifestyle, and now you're back to living paycheck to paycheck, but at a higher income level. The people who actually build wealth in their 30s do something different. When they get a raise, they don't change their lifestyle at all. They keep living like they did before, and they throw that extra money directly into investments or retirement savings. Let me give you a concrete example because I think you need to see how this actually plays out. Imagine you get promoted and your salary bumps from $50,000 to $65,000. You're making $15,000 more per year. Here is the decision point. If you increase your lifestyle to match, you'll basically be in the same spot in 10 years. But if you keep your lifestyle the same and increase your investments, the compound returns start doing the heavy lifting. That's the difference between someone who builds wealth and someone who just keeps making more money, but stays broke. But here's something even more important than investment strategies or account consolidation. Don't let building wealth become so consuming that you forget money is supposed to be a tool, not an obsession. Your 30s are likely some of the most memorable years of your life. You're establishing yourself professionally, maybe starting a family, traveling while you still can, and creating relationships that will last for decades. Yes, you should be saving and investing consistently. Yes, you should be building your net worth, but you shouldn't be so focused on hitting arbitrary financial milestones that you miss out on experiences that matter to you. The goal isn't to die with the most money in the bank. The goal is to have enough money to live the life you actually want to live. This means spending intentionally on things you value while cutting ruthlessly on things you don't. Maybe you don't care about having the latest car, but you do care about taking an annual vacation with your family. Maybe eating out doesn't bring you much joy, but having a nice home does. The key is understanding the difference between spending on what you value versus spending on what you think you're supposed to value, based on what everyone else seems to be doing. Your financial journey in your 30s won't look like anyone else's, and that's perfectly fine. Some people will buy houses early and be house rich, but cash poor for years. Others will rent longer and focus on building investment accounts. Some will prioritize paying off student loans aggressively, while others will make minimum payments and invest the difference. None of these approaches is inherently right or wrong. They're just different paths toward the same general destination of financial security. The people who successfully build wealth during their 30s understand that it's a marathon, not a sprint. They focus on consistency over perfection, automation over optimization, and progress over comparison. They understand that some years will be better than others, some months will be complete disasters financially, and that building wealth is more about what you do consistently over time than what you do perfectly in any given moment. Most importantly, they understand that being in your 30s and feeling financially overwhelmed doesn't mean you're doing anything wrong. It means you're human, living in a complex world with competing priorities and limited resources. The fact that you're thinking about building wealth, watching videos like this, and trying to make better financial decisions already puts you ahead of a huge percentage of your peers. The beautiful irony of feeling behind in your 30s is that most people who eventually become wealthy felt exactly the same way during this decade. They were convinced they were financial disasters while making decisions that would transform their lives 20 years later. The difference between people who build wealth and people who don't isn't that wealthy people never felt overwhelmed by money. It's that they kept making good decisions even when those decisions felt insignificant at the time. Let's talk about what compound interest actually looks like when you're 30 versus what it felt like when you were 22. And some financial advisor was droning on about the magic of starting early. When you're in your early 30s, every dollar you invest today has the potential to become $20 by the time you retire. Even if you're pushing 40, that dollar can still become $8. These aren't theoretical numbers pulled from some finance textbook. This is your actual money multiplying itself while you're busy dealing with everything else life throws at you. But here's where people get tripped up. They hear about compound interest and think it means their account balance should be growing dramatically every month. Then they check their investment account after 6 months of contributing $400 monthly and see it's only grown by $2,400, and they think something must be wrong. They're expecting fireworks when compound interest starts as a gentle whisper that eventually becomes a roar. The acceleration happens gradually, then suddenly. For the first few years, most of your account growth comes from your own contributions. You're doing the heavy lifting while compound interest stretches and warms up on the bench. But somewhere around year 7 or 8, compound interest tags in and starts pulling its weight. By year 15, compound interest is doing most of the work while your contributions become the supporting player. This is why people in their 50s and 60s often look back at their 30s and say it was the most important decade for their wealth building, even though it didn't feel that way at the time. They were laying a foundation that they couldn't see because foundations are underground and boring, but without that foundation, everything that comes later becomes impossible. So here's the truth about building wealth in your 30s that nobody wants to admit. It's messy, it's imperfect, and it probably won't look like the Instagram-worthy financial journey you imagined. But if you can embrace the chaos, keep your strategy simple, and remember that compound interest doesn't care about your timeline. You'll look back in 20 years wondering why you ever worried about being behind. Your future self is counting on the imperfect decisions you make today.